Welcome to the GS1 Databar Training presentation for Gourmet Foods International. To begin, we'll cover exactly what a GS1 Databar is and what it entails. A GS1 Databar is essentially a scannable barcode that can very quickly and compactly enclose information on an item. When a GS1 contains multiple chunks of information, it is known as an expanded GS1. These multiple pieces or chunks of info are known as data elements, and they are preceded by specific application identifiers that let your scan gun know exactly what it's reading. Since different fields require different data elements, the application identifiers can vary widely between industries. For example, in food distribution, we almost always require some sort of product dating on an item, whether it be best by, expiration, or production date. On the flip side, a company that manufactures and distributes standard drywall screws would not be required to include these same data elements. In the next portion of the presentation, we'll review recognizing the different GS1 formats seen on products around the world. At first glance, the three codes on this sheet look very different. However, these are all considered GS1 data bars. A GS1 data bar may vary in length. They can be anywhere from 16 digits, like the bottom example with only the G10 and G10 application identifier, 0, 1, included, to several dozen digits, like the uppermost example. The uppermost example includes 4 data elements. As we discussed earlier in the presentation, these data bars may vary in length and will change dependent on the information contained within. A GS1 data bar can and often will contain letters as well as numbers, as some of the most common data elements, like lot code, for example, can include alphanumeric characters. Seen here is an example of a G10, or GTIN 14. A GTIN will be comprised of 14 digits and will not change from case to case. This numeric sequence is unique to the item within, and there are no variables within the code. These codes are not considered omnidirectional, meaning these barcodes are not intended to be used for scanning out the door at store level. Said differently, you wouldn't see a GTIN on a retail pack of crackers you buy at a convenience store. Though, the wholesale case of crackers the store received off the delivery truck may have been labeled with a GTIN. The UPC code is common and found on almost all items sold at retail level. UPC stands for Universal Product Code. The leading digit of a UPC code lets the scanner know what type of transaction is occurring. For example, UPCs beginning with a 5, like the top right example, are coupons. The transaction will result in a negative amount, like $1 off. The first group of 5 digits, immediately after the leading digit of 5, is a prefix unique to the vendor. In this first example, we see 43000. In the bottom left example, we see 20581. This is unique to GFI on items like queso melt, La Bonne Vie. They will always display a 20581 as their vendor prefix. The second group of 5 digits, in the bottom example, 00874, is a code unique to the item within the case or the package. Finally, the last digit is known as the check digit and is calculated by a standard algorithm that does not change. These 4 elements ensure that each UPC code is truly unique to the item enclosed within. Here is an expanded GS1 data bar with 4 data elements underlined in different colors. As we briefly discussed earlier in the presentation, a GS1 data bar can be comprised of multiple chunks of information known as data elements. The first and most essential element that is contained within every GS1 data bar is the item's GTIN code, which we talked about earlier. This is always identified by the application identifier 0, 1, as seen in the examples above. In addition to the GTIN, this expanded GS1 data bar includes 2 additional elements. One of the elements, notated by the application identifier 15, is the sell-by date. In this example, the element outlined in red communicates to the scan gun that this item has a sell-by date of December 31st, 1999. Weight in pounds is flagged with the application identifier 3202. In this example, the GS1 data bar is coded to tell us that the G10 on this item is 9001234567898, and the weight in pounds, notated by 3203, is 1.56. So we can see the item is 1.56 pounds. We sometimes see letters and numbers contained within an element of a GS1. This application identifier 10 lets our scan gun know that this is a lot number. In this example, the lot number is ABC123. This is especially important when tracking product during a recall, for example. Here is a very abbreviated list of some of the hundreds of available application identifiers recognized by GS1. Some of the AIs on this list may look familiar to anyone who has handled GFI products. For example, 01 for the GTIN code, 10 for batch or lot code, 17 for expiration date, 11 for production date. These are all commonly used on food items in our warehouse. Pictured here are different applications and forms of GS1 data bars on products. As you can see in these examples, different industries have different ways of notating their items and different needs, so this is just a couple examples of those. Here is an example of an expanded GS1 data bar with 4 elements outlined. As you can see in the example below, there are 4 different application identifiers which immediately precede information contained within the scan bar. These application identifiers are 01 for the GTIN code, 15 for the sell by, which is 10/10/2014, 3153, which is the application identifier for net volume in liters, and then 3922, which is an area where a vendor can place a price. For example, $3.02 maybe per pound or liter on this item. Some of the benefits to using a GS1 expanded data bar like the one in the example above is that they facilitate item verification by taking the human element out of interpretation and product tracking. For example, scan-out programs will be able to identify exactly which items were shipped to which customer. For example, Earthfare Store 600 received 1 case of item 1234 with a sell-by date of 1/1/2001 from production lot ABCD 1234 on the BG route. As you can see and probably glean from this information above, this would be very important and very helpful during a recall. This next slide outlines for us how we would classify an item in IDS. Now that we've gone through all the different ways that a GS1 can be presented on a case, it's a lot easier to see the scan flags and their definitions and how they may apply to items in our warehouse. During any physical checks, always physically check the case for any type of scan bar. After watching this presentation, you should be familiar with the looks of a 12-digit UPC code, a GS1, and a GTIN code. Items are usually labeled with a UPC, which would be an S, a GTIN, which would also be an S, a GS1, which we would use a flag of 1, or sometimes they lack a label entirely. That's when we would use an L. These are the scan flag definitions that we have set forth for GFI. This item has been verified and is labeled with a GS1 upon receipt from the vendor. The scan flag of G incorrectly prompts the warehouse to label these cases with GFI created GS1s, creating extra work that is not necessary. So this is just an example of an error. If you're responsible for updating scan flags in IDS, this is where you would go. From the Warehouse Operations menu, choose Other Reports, Item Scanning Reports, enter scan flag all division, and update scan flag all divisions. So in the example we just discussed where the item was erroneously labeled with a G, after going through the steps in the last slide, you can update to a 1 and it will update for all divisions. Of course, this would only need to be done if the item had been physically verified to be labeled with a GS1 by the vendor.